So today we're going to cover overcoming the challenges of e-commerce, and I'll go right into it. So first, we have the category, what is e-commerce? And I'll show you a couple of categories of e-commerce because there's actually different types. What site comes to mind first when you think of e-commerce? Probably Amazon. They're, by and large, the biggest, the most prominent. But that's not the type of e-commerce I'm covering today. It's actually an example of marketplace e-commerce. So we'll put that over there. There's other sites that qualify as marketplace e-commerce, things like eBay, and we'll put that over there, things like eBay and Etsy. And there's a number of others, but those are just a couple of examples to help you understand what marketplace e-commerce is. The next is consumer-to-consumer e-commerce, and that is platforms like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, and actually, so eBay and Etsy, they both qualify as consumer-to-consumer e-commerce as well. But they actually kind of blur the line because with eBay, you can have businesses selling to consumers and consumers selling to each other, and Etsy is the same way. The category we'll mostly cover is freestanding e-commerce. So that's what we're wanting to talk about. And that's probably what you're most interested in. So freestanding e-commerce is when you have your store, say Sean's Famous Chocolates, located at seansfamous.com. And that's very different from marketplace e-commerce and consumer-to-consumer e-commerce, where you're selling on someone else's platform. This is where you're selling on your platform, so to speak, where you will use someone else's software perhaps to execute the e-commerce. It's still your site. You still own the content. You still control the flow of sales and how shipping is done and all of that. But with Amazon, eBay, Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, you have less control over who sees it and what's available and who else is there. Now with freestanding e-commerce, there's nobody else there. And that's one of the greatest benefits, because if you're selling on Amazon, you're selling your chocolates, then a bunch of other sellers are going to come up right next to yours. And maybe the other seller paid more. Maybe they paid more to have their product featured higher in the list. So having freestanding e-commerce is very important. And that's always the goal with the website, actually, is to get them to the website. You're doing all these other things to get them to the website where they're undistracted by other providers and other vendors, other merchants. Now, the next in what is e-commerce is physical versus the digital, and they're actually more similar than you might think. So your physical store has a physical location, say 600 West 6th Street. You have a chocolate shop. And your digital store is a digital version of your physical store. The digitalness doesn't change a lot about the store itself. It doesn't change what you sell. It can, but it doesn't have to. You can have online-only things, you can have in-store-only things, or you can sell all the same products. It doesn't have to change what you sell. It does change the fulfillment, though. So there's certain key differences that are different, but there's a lot that's similar, and I'll show you more that's similar in just a second. Next is the fulfillment, as I mentioned, the biggest difference, the most significant, which is, and so for e-commerce, there's two types of fulfillment. There's pre-purchase fulfillment, and that's for the physical, and that's where production, packaging, and shipping all come before your purchase, or before the customer's purchase, rather. But with e-commerce, the order is essentially reversed, where you have post-purchase fulfillment, meaning that you fulfill it after the purchase. And you have production, and in a second I'll show you, production doesn't always come before purchase, but you have production, and then the purchase, and then packaging and shipping. And packaging and shipping are what's primarily the fulfillment, Production is a separate entity. Fulfillment is typically considered packing it or picking it from wherever it is stored, packing it in something to ship, and shipping it to the customer. And then, as I said, the production doesn't always have to come before the purchase. So for things like print on demand, for like t-shirts or some promotional items, even books, you can purchase it and then they can print it and produce it, so production, and then package it and ship it. So the purchase comes very first, or in the first example of post-purchase, it's just higher in the list. So it's the difference is pre-purchase fulfillment is the purchase is pretty much the last thing that is done in the chain of what happens to the product. Versus in post-purchase fulfillment, the purchase is one of the first things that happens, except for in a lot of cases actually production. So next we'll cover, well, this is how does it work now, but we'll cover finding customers. So just like your physical store, you create a marketing plan. And maybe in your marketing plan, you have Google Ads, you have email marketing, a blog, networking, referrals, reviews, and there's a bunch of other things. I don't need to list them all. And then you're taking all of that and you're funneling them, you're directing them to your physical store at 600 West 6th Street. But the only difference in marketing between the physical store and the digital store is where you're sending them. All the marketing is all the same thing. You're just funneling them to a different destination. And in your marketing plan, it's actually pretty easy to swap that out. You might have to change some wording. You change your blog up a little. You tell your referral partners in your network about things differently. But ultimately, it's much the same. You're doing the same things. You're doing them a little differently, but you're directing them to a different place. That's the key difference in the marketing aspect, in the marketing portion. And next is some of the challenges based on, next is what e-commerce is not. Because knowing what it is one thing, and understanding what it isn't helps you understand what it is. So the first thing is e-commerce is not magic. It's really about investing time. So you have two options as far as spending your time. You can invest, say, 1 hour in your e-commerce setup, and then 100 customers can spend 100 hours on your site trying to place orders. But what will happen if you do that is you're saving yourself a bunch of time, but you're making your customers spend a bunch more time. They have to spend much more time on your site. They have to get frustrated trying to order what they want. And in a lot of cases, if they get frustrated with it, they're just going to leave. They're not going to make the purchase if it's hard. So you're making it hard for yourself or for someone else if you want to outsource it. You're making it hard for yourself and investing the time and the money and all the resources and getting it set up really well so that you can minimize your customers' time spent on your site, which in turn maximizes the sales because they go, oh, click, 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 find exactly what they want, put it in their cart, order, boom, they're done. And you've made your sale. And I'll show it again, you can spend 100 hours on your e-commerce setup, and then your 100 customers can spend 100 minutes, so 1 minute each, on your site. And if they only have to spend a minute on your site, that's awesome because it takes up less hosting resources to load pages and things. And they get through it quicker. That means they're finding exactly what they want and they're ordering it. So if you're providing them what they want, where they want, and it's easy for them to access it, they're going to order it. Another example, analogy, I guess, is you can't take a camera, even if it's a nice camera, spend 20 minutes and grab your friend Joe and make The Sound of Music. You can't make a masterpiece with some camera, 20 minutes, and your friend Joe. You just can't. It might be funny, but it's not going to be high quality. It's not going to be a top-notch movie or video. YouTube videos are exactly the same. If you want to produce an excellent YouTube video, you have to spend hours and hours and days even of setting up sets, setting up prompts, setting up everything that goes into the video, everything that the viewer is going to see. You have to put it perfectly, and you have to script, and you have to make it so that everybody's going to go to the right place at the right time, and everything has to be well planned. And if you don't do that, it's not going to work. The best YouTube videos require great investment. They look effortless, but they're by no means effortless. If you watch a 20-minute video that's effortless to watch, has excellent transitions, that took hours to create. And e-commerce is no different. If you have a website, an e-commerce site rather, that is easy to use and you can get to it easily and get to what you're looking for, add to cart, check out, it's all very smooth, that took great investment. It's like Amazon. Amazon took hours, weeks, months, tons of employees to run. And look at where they are today. They didn't start like that. You look at pictures of old Amazon, and it's much worse. It's still really good for the time, but it's not as good as it is now. They invested the time to make it easy for the sellers and the consumers to be connected and to place, or for the consumers to place orders and for the sellers to fulfill. And Amazon even does the fulfillment. So they're making it very easy with reducing friction as much as possible. And that's the goal with creating an excellent e-commerce site. So with what we've covered just now, I'm going to bring that into some of the concerns and some of the challenges with e-commerce. And concern number one, or challenge number one, is how do I pay taxes? Now, bear in mind, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a CPA. I'm nothing like that. This is my experience, and this is what I understand. But if you want to execute any of this, you have to consult your CPA, your accountant, and a certified financial advisor. This is not financial advice. But my experience has to do with one word, nexus. It's one word with huge implications. Implications being, if you haven't made, or rather, if the money you've made in, say, Florida, in any given state, it applies to all of them, is less than the set dollar amount for nexus, then you don't have to pay or file any sales tax. So that means, unless you're making a considerable sum of money, and the amount is relatively high, so you don't have to worry if you make one sale in Florida. You make a couple sales in South Carolina, you don't have to worry about that. But after you make a considerable sum of money, then you have to start thinking about it. You do have to watch. You have to watch carefully, because once you hit the threshold, you do have to register, and you have to file and pay. You have to do all of the things you would expect. But before that, you don't have to do those things. So before you hit the nexus number, it's about watching how much you're selling into Florida, watching how much you're selling into South Carolina, and just making sure that you aren't above that threshold. And the next challenge we really already covered is, how do I find customers? And it's actually the same as what you're doing for the most part. You create a marketing plan and you direct them to SeanSamus.com, or your website, not mine. But you can direct them there instead of your physical store. Or you can even direct them to both at the same time. And you can do that by displaying your information on your e-commerce site. You display your address and your contact information and all of that. You put it in the footer, make a contact form, you can do all that. And you can even offer pickup on a lot of platforms, where if you're selling at a farmer's market or you're selling wherever, physically, you can offer for them to pick it up at your physical store. So what you can do is maybe offer a temporary thing online only. You do physical only. You are creating urgency and you're driving people to the website and you're driving people to your physical store at the same time. So they can purchase it online and they can pick it up or they can have it shipped. And shipping, maybe it takes 2 or 3 days, but if they want to pick it up tomorrow at the farmer's market or at your store, then there's no problem. They just pick it up and they can get it immediately as soon as they can get there. So you can direct them with your marketing plan to both places at the same time. And the next challenge is, how do I make it easy to use? And on this slide, it's a very simple answer. We covered it previously. It's that you invest upfront to save your customers time. So you're making that upfront investment of your time and your money, and you get to change the ratio. You can spend all your time making your e-commerce site and spend almost no money, or you can spend more money and spend almost no time on it yourself. So you can change that ratio a lot, but you can't change the overall investment for your e-commerce site because you have to invest time and or money. Again, you change the ratio, but you have to invest both into your e-commerce site to create an incredible experience for the customer so that they make the purchase. So it's easy to use, they find exactly what they're looking for, they find it quickly. Now the last concern is, where do I start? So step number 1 is understanding what e-commerce is, which we've just covered. Hopefully it's been informative, and if it's not been informative enough, we're going to have some questions afterwards. I'll take questions. And step number 2 is to get a regular website for your business and to create a marketing plan. And actually, a regular website can be integrated and be on the same platform as your e-commerce site. And then the marketing plan, which we covered previously, it includes all the things like Google Ads and email marketing and blog and just all of those things that direct people to your e-commerce site and sometimes to your regular site, depending on what you're selling. If you're selling services, e-commerce may not be the way to go. But if you're selling products, then e-commerce can be very useful. It's a very useful tool. And then step number 3 is to either work with someone else and have them help you choose, or step number 3 for DIY is choose a suitable e-commerce platform. And there's many platforms to choose from, but next week, next Monday at 5:30, I'll be covering choosing a suitable e-commerce platform. I'll be comparing Square Online, Shopify, and WooCommerce. And those are not all created equal. There's 3 very different options, and they're good for different use cases and bad for others. And we'll be comparing them and showing you different use cases that are good, different features that are helpful for different business types, and covering them very thoroughly. And the last part is questions.